In this session, we're going to look at editing PODD in Grid for iPad. My name's Anita and I work at the content team here at Smartbox. And I'm going to start by showing you our Grid, which is our flagship software. It has a focus on AAC, but it also has lots of tools to support independence in different ways. Grid is available on Windows and iOS devices, and we're going to focus on Grid for iPad today, but the two platforms are very similar. So anything that you see we're doing today in Grid for iPad, you'll be able to do in Grid 3 if you're using a Windows device. Within Grid, we have a number of different resources and vocabularies available, and that includes PODD. So PODD was created, PODD for Grid was created for Smartbox by Gail Porter, who is the owner of PODD. And it's based on the same principles as paper PODD books, but it's been optimized for use on electronic devices. So if you've used a paper PODD book before, you'll recognize the layout and the setup of PODD in Grid. We have 6 different grid sets available, and I'll explain a bit more about these in a moment. And PODD is available as an additional purchase within Grid for iPad. So it's $79.99 to access all the different versions of PODD that we have. And you just pay that once and then you can download whichever version you like. We also have eye gaze ready versions of the PODD grid sets, and these are available on Windows devices. So if you have a user who accesses their vocabulary using an eye gaze camera, these grid sets would be perfect for them. So of our 6 PODD vocabularies, we have different cell counts and different language levels. We start with PODD 15, which is available in either a preschool or a school-based vocabulary. And then we have PODD 15 Plus, which also has 15 cell locations, but introduces more vocabulary so that users can start to build up longer sentences. We also have 60 cell count versions of PODD. So we have PODD 60 Expanded Keyword and PODD 60 Complex Syntax. And these both add more grammatical functions and more vocabulary to allow users to create more grammatically correct sentences. So, for example, changing verb forms by adding ed or ing, and adding some of the smaller words and that make a more grammatically correct sentence. I'm going to there's much more about our PODD grid sets on our website, so we'll pop the link at the end of this presentation. But it's www.thinksmartbox.com, and you'll find a whole section on PODD there that explains the different grid sets and more of the background of PODD as well. So I'm going to jump into Grid for iPad now and show you how you can add the PODD grid sets, and then how we can easily edit them and personalize them as well. When you've chosen which version you want, so for example, PODD 15 School, when you tap into it, it'll give you a little bit more information about that specific grid set, and you'll also see the price appear. Mine's appearing in British pounds because I'm here in the UK, and yours should appear in dollars if you're in the US. And to download the grid set, you need to tap on the price, which will bring up information about how you can pay for your grid set, depending on the settings on your device. As I said, you only need to make that payment once, and then you'll be able to add any other PODD grid sets to your device. So I'm going to jump into one of the grid sets now and show you how you can add vocabulary and personalize it. As it's opening up, it's just worth noting that all of the vocabulary in PODD has been carefully chosen and arranged by Gail Porter. So although there's plenty of space to add new items, we don't recommend moving around what's already there. There are plenty of places where you might like to add vocabulary, and we definitely recommend that to make it personal for the user. So there's sections about people in the user's life. You might like to go to animals and add pets' names. You might like to add favourite toys or favourite foods and things like that. I'm going to start today by adding a favourite toy. And to do that, I'm going to go to I want and then toys. And as you can see, in this grid already, there's plenty of blank spaces where you can add specific vocabulary. So to do that, I need to enter edit mode. And once again, I need to bring up my menu. So I'm going to tap the 3 dots in the top right-hand corner. And this time I'm going to choose edit grids. That's going to take me into edit mode, and you'll know you're in edit mode when you can see the orange border around your screen. Then I need to choose which cell I want to edit. So I'm going to choose this blank one next to toys. And when I tap it once, it brings up the option to edit cell. So I'm going to tap edit cell, and that'll zoom in on the cell that I want to make changes to. As you can see, the cell is made up of two parts. We have a text box at the top where you can add your vocabulary label, and then there's a space underneath to add an image. So I'm going to start with the label, and I'm going to add dinosaur. So I'm thinking of a user who has a favorite toy dinosaur, and that's really motivating for him, so I want to add it into his vocabulary. I've typed out the word using my on-screen keyboard, and now I'm going to tap the image section of the cell. When I do that, you can see that it's already suggested a number of symbols for me based on what I've written into the text box. I like this green dinosaur in the middle. That looks like the toy I'm imagining. So I'm going to tap that one, and it's going to add it to the cell for me. If I'm happy with how my cell looks, I can tap Done, which is in the top left-hand corner. And that zooms out so I can see the whole grid once again. To add another vocabulary item, I just need to repeat the process. So choose a cell to edit, tap Edit Cell, which zooms in on that cell, and tap into the text box to bring up your on-screen keyboard. This time I'm going to add a cuddly toy. So I'm going to type that out, cuddly toy. And I'm going to tap onto the box to see what it's going to offer me this time. The cuddly toy I have in my head isn't either of these options. I'm thinking about a nice big cuddly lion. And so I don't want a teddy bear or these toys on the side either. So I now need to do a more in-depth search to give me other options of images that I might like to add to my cell. And I can do that by selecting this option here that says Find Picture. So just below where the images are shown, you can see Find Picture. And that brings up a number of places that I can look for a different picture. So I can search in my symbol libraries. I can look at photos that I have stored on my device. I could do a web search, or I could even use my camera to take a quick photo there and then. I'm going to stick in symbols, so I'm going to select symbols, and you can see it's bringing up those same two images based on the search term that's in the search box at the top. So I'm going to clear that search box, and I'm going to type in lion. And then you might need to hide your on-screen keyboard, which you can do in the bottom right-hand corner. And you can see it's given me a wider range of options here, and I can see the lion that I want. So I'm going to tap that lion, and it adds it to my cell. Once again, when I'm happy with my cell, I can select Done in the top left-hand corner to zoom out, and then I can see my whole grid once again. If I'm happy with my changes, I can select Finish Editing, also in the top left-hand corner, and that will save all my changes. But if I wanted to undo something that I'd just done and I wasn't happy with the change I'd made, I can also use the Undo option, which is just next to Finish Editing. So I'm going to undo and take off that second cell I made, undo, undo, and that's just taken that away. And now I'm happy. I can select Finish Editing to save my changes. Okay, I'm going to jump back to the home grid. I'm going to show you another place where you might like to add vocabulary and another way that you can do this. So I'm going to go to Categories and then People. And as I mentioned, there's space here to add names of important people in a user's life. And actually, there's even a little tip that says add names of immediate family. I'm going to add the name of a member of my work family, so one of my colleagues here at Smartbox. And once again, I need to enter edit mode to do that. So I'm going to bring up the menu via the three dots in the top right-hand corner. I'm going to select Edit Grids. And I know I'm in edit mode because the orange border is turned up again. Then I'm going to tap the cell and tap Edit Cell to zoom in. So I'm going to add my colleague Kerry. I'm going to type her name into the text box. And then when I click on the image box, you'll see there's no pictures coming up. And that's not surprising. I'm not expecting there to be a saved symbol of Kerry. But what I can do instead is use that same find picture option. And I'm going to go to my photo library. So when I click photo library, that's going to bring up different locations on my device where pictures might be stored. So I'm going to go to recent, and I'm going to find the image of my friend Kerry. I'm going to click on that, and it's going to add it to my cell. I can select done to zoom out and finish editing to save my changes. And that's a really nice, quick, easy way that you can make this grid particularly motivating for users because it makes it very personal for them. Right, finally, I'm going to show you one more place where you might like to make personalizations, and it's got a slightly different mechanism to do that. So I'm going to go to greetings and manners, and then I'm going to go to about me. And this grid is great because it has lots of lovely sentence starters that allow the user to share information about themselves with people that they might have just met or they might be having a conversation with. But if I select one of these sentence starters, for example, movie, you can see that it's not finished yet. It hasn't been personalized for someone. So this is definitely a place that we suggest making personalizations, and I'm going to show you how to do that now. So once again, I need to go into edit mode. I'm going to select the 3 dots in the top right, select edit grids, wait for the orange border. And then I'm going to choose one of these cells to edit and make it about myself or about the user. I'm going to choose the I live cell, and I'm going to select edit cell. What's different about these cells is that when you make changes to the text that's saved, it won't necessarily change what's on the cell label. And that's been done deliberately to keep the cell labels nice and clear for the users. So if I typed in, I live in Bristol, England, you can see that that cell is getting very long. So the text is there's too much text on there, it might be a bit confusing. So instead, what we have is this option to make changes in the right cell. So if you look on the right hand side of the screen, you'll see this right cell, and I can tap into that in the same way to bring up my on-screen keyboard, and I can type what I was about to say. I live in Bristol in England. And whilst that information is now saved on my cell, it hasn't appeared on the cell label itself. So it's kept the label nice and clear, but it's added the information to the cell. So that's because this setting at the top, which we call same as cell label, is off. If I slid that slider on, it puts the whole sentence onto the cell. But as I said, that looks quite complicated. So I'm going to slide it off again and just keep that saved sort of in the background. And I'll show you what happens now if I select done and then I select finish editing. So although the cell, so now you can see, although the cell itself hasn't changed, when I click on it, you get the whole sentence that I saved in that right cell on the right hand side of the screen. So that's the same for all of the cells in this section. I'll just show you one more time, enter edit mode. And for example, movie, if I select edit cell, I need to look on the right hand side of the screen and you can see it already has the sentence starter. My favorite movie is, if I click onto that area, it'll bring up my keyboard and I can fill that in. If I could type. And that will save that then, but it doesn't change the text on the cell itself. And I need to select done and finish editing to save my changes. So that's a quick overview of editing Pod in Grid for iPad. You can download a free trial right now of Grid for iPad to explore the editing tools we've covered today. And if you want to try Pod during your trial, there are those sample grids that I showed you at the bottom of the Add Grid Set menu. So you can download those and have a little taster in the same way that we covered. Finally, an important thing to mention is a great function that we have in Grid, which is remote editing. This allows you to access and edit a user's grid from another device as long as you've been given permission to do so. It's a really handy option if you want to make changes, but you don't have the user's device to hand. If you need more information about anything grid, you can go to our website, which is www.thinksmartbox.com. We have a really active Facebook community, so you can find us on there, or you can get in touch via email, which is hello@thinksmartbox.com. Thank you for your time and thank you for listening.